My name is Judy. I'm an intelligence analyst for the FBI here in Midland. So my first question is, do you guys know what the FBI is? Federal Bureau of Investigation, but what is it? No idea? Don't you watch TV? It's always on TV. They do the crime scene shows and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so the Federal Bureau of Investigation actually does what it says. We investigate federal crimes. So we cover a lot of stuff. And tonight I'm going to talk to you about the true cost of crime. So, okay, have you guys ever, okay, like you see on TV and you see on different things somebody getting arrested, right? So what happens when you're arrested? Yeah, you do something wrong to get arrested, but then what happens? Take you to jail, okay? So basically, do you remember any parts where they put your hands behind your back? Okay, so yeah, an arrest is when you're taken into custody, but there's something called an incident. So say you are pulled over for speeding and the officer writes you a ticket. That would be an incident. So it's an encounter with law enforcement where it doesn't result in an arrest. So it could be, say you're caught drinking out on the street with an open container and you're underage. They might cite you for that, but they aren't going to necessarily arrest you. It's always up to the discretion of the agency and the officer, so that's an incident. So incidents don't necessarily show up on your quote-unquote permanent record. Have they ever told you at school, be careful about that because it'll show up on your permanent record? Okay, I used to always be scared of that because I was one of those kids that was, not only was I a nerd, but I just was like, I never wanted to put a foot wrong. And so I tried to keep good grades, I tried to do the good citizenship, things like that. But you do actually have a permanent record, and we'll get into that in a little bit. So an arrest, different from an incident, that's an encounter with law enforcement where you actually are taken into custody and fingerprinted, and that goes on your record. And everybody can end up with a record. So let's talk about the different types. So that's, you're taken away in custody. There are different types of agencies for law enforcement, right? You guys know Midland PD, right? Midland PD basically polices the city. What about Midland County, the sheriff's office? What do? It's pretty easy. The county. They police the county. So if it's inside the city limits, it's typically Midland PD. If it's inside Midland County, but doesn't fall under Midland PD, then it would be the sheriff's office. So then there's the state. So do you guys know anything about state law enforcement here? State troopers, Texas Department of Public Safety, any of that? Ringing a bell? Okay, so every place has a local, a county, a state, and then the federal. So say you're arrested by Midland PD. Midland PD is going to have a record there, but they're also going to send it to the state of Texas for the Texas DPS because they're the repository. And a repository is just where all the records are kept. But do you think that the state of Texas is going to keep records for the state of California or the state of Oklahoma? No. Each state keeps its own records. However, the federal level, the FBI is the major repository for all the criminal records in the United States. So, and all of those criminal records are fingerprint based. So basically, local is the PD and the sheriff's office, then the state in Texas is Texas DPS, and then federal crimes are what we do. So we are the Federal Bureau of Investigation. There are other federal agencies like the Drug Enforcement Administration, there's Homeland Security investigations, there's all kinds of federal agencies, and we each have a different piece of what we do. So FBI in particular we work with other agencies, so we do work on drugs and gangs and stuff like that. But we also look at, say, public corruption and white-collar crimes such as embezzlement. We look at wire fraud, healthcare fraud. So we investigate a whole bunch of federal crimes. But we also hold the federal repository for all the criminal records. So even DEA is going to send their criminal records to us, okay? All right, so A criminal record, that's like your permanent record. Everybody gets one when they're arrested. And you hope that after you've established a criminal record, say you were arrested for something, you also hope that that agency puts what they call a disposition on it. A disposition shows what happened. So say you were arrested for, I don't know, drug trafficking, and you were found to be not guilty. So you hope that they send that in to make the record show that you weren't convicted of it or whatever. So basically, this is what a criminal record used to look like. Can you guys see there's all kinds of handwriting on there and it's all torn up and it's dirty and stuff? Okay, so I've been with the FBI for 30 years, so we used to deal with fingerprint cards like this. So they would actually, when they would get a new arrest come in, they would take the MasterCard and write on it what the person had done. And these cards are nasty. They're all digitized now, thank goodness. But basically, it's all based on fingerprints, and it's all based on everybody sending the records to the next level. So now, have you guys heard of rap sheet? Okay, the rap sheet is like a nickname for your criminal record. That's just like the slang term for it. And they are a little more pretty nowadays. They're digitized, so they're typed up. You can read them. The photos are on them. Like this, the old one, it's where it's going to be the photos glued on. So a lot of times when we would look in the fingerprint files, we would just find photos that had fallen to the bottom of the thing, so we may or may not have had it on record. Okay, then now there's something called an identity history summary check. So here's the weird thing. Everybody can get a copy of their own FBI record. Why do you think you'd want a copy of your record? Okay, say you want to go to school someday and get a good job. Some employers are going to request that background check or that record to see if you have any criminal activity on it. Sometimes if you're applying to go to school or go to travel overseas and you need a visa, then they're going to ask for your FBI record to see if you're a criminal, because they don't want the criminals in their country either. So there's many reasons why somebody may request their own record. And sometimes if you did something as a kid, like say you were 17 and you did something and you're not quite sure if it's going to show up on your record, you can request a copy of your own record to see what's on there. And to make sure, like I said, those dispositions are on there. So anytime you're arrested and fingerprinted, it's going to go on your record. Okay, now, you guys are kids. You're considered juveniles. Do you know what juvenile means? What? Not an adult. What's the age that most people consider a juvenile? Nope, keep going up. 18, there you go. So basically, if you're 18 or under, you're considered, well, 18 is now an adult, so under 18 is a juvenile. And then there's the adult. So anybody over 18 and over is considered an adult. So this would be an example of a juvenile. He's flashing some gang signs there. And this would be an adult. So a little bit of a difference between the hand gang signs and actually being, you know, all tatted up and everything, right? Okay. So here's the question for you. If you have a criminal record as a juvenile, what happens to it when you turn 18? Nope. Say again, you got to talk up. It stays in your record, yes. Basically, almost everybody in the U.S. thinks when they're a kid that whatever they did as a kid will go away when they turn 18. This does not happen. Because, say you're committing crimes up until your 18th birthday, do you really think that they should disappear when you turn 18? No. Okay. So, suppose you did something when you were 15. Say you stole a car when you were 15, and you did your probation or whatever you were assigned to do, but then you didn't do anything else wrong, and now you're 18 and you want to go to college and get a good job. What do? Okay, there's two things you can do. And remember, you can't keep committing crime up until your 18th birthday, but there are two things that you can do. One is called a sealing, which basically means the record is sealed so nobody without a court order. And that would be a very good reason to open the record. An expungement is like erasing chalk from a chalkboard. It's gone. Now, both of these are court procedures. You have to go to court. You have to explain to the judge why you think your record should either be sealed or should be expunged. Basically show you're now of good character, you've mended your ways, you're not going to do anything wrong going forward. But this also costs money. So if you want to do that, you have to go to court, come up with whatever the amount of money is. You have to pay the court costs and everything to go through this procedure. To my way of thinking, it would just be easier to not commit the crimes, right? Because then that way you don't have to worry about this. But unfortunately, a lot of people do have to worry about it. Tell you, let's see, I like funny stories, but do kids get, what does incarceration mean? No clue? Remember we were talking about getting put in jail? If you have to stay in jail or go to prison, that's incarceration. Sometimes the incarceration can be house arrest, or you could be put in a halfway house or something like that, but I'm talking about actual lockup. Okay? So imagine living here. You have a cell, you have a roommate or two or three, and maybe they don't like you. Is life going to be very pleasant? Probably not. Okay. So how many kids, and I'm saying under 18, do you think are incarcerated in prison in the United States right now? Take a guess. And you guys can guess too. A little lower. Okay. As of 2025, kids that are in actual incarceration like this right now, according to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, there's about 27,600. But this is juvenile incarceration. This is kids with other kids. How many do you think are in the adult prison system? Nearly 3,000. Nearly 3,000. So say you're 15, you commit a homicide or a murder, and you're tried as an adult, and you're put in prison with the big guys. Life's going to be real unpleasant real quick, right? Hard to imagine, but it does happen. When we talk about juvenile incarceration, we're not actually talking about like halfway houses where you're put. And so, now here's an interesting question. Do you think Midland has a juvenile incarceration or detention facility? What is it? Do we have one? But there is one, right? Okay. True story. Midland does have one. It's called Culver. It is set up to take 28 kids, but it's only staffed to take 8. So the kids that are put in there are literally the worst of the worst. It may be somebody who committed a homicide and is waiting to go to adult prison. So probably also not a place you really want to go. Okay, so now we've talked about how many kids are in jail. Where do you think they go? If we don't have a really big juvenile detention facility here, where do you think they're going to go? Got to speak up. A different location where? Let's think about this. Texas is a big state, right? You may get sent, bless you, you may get sent out of Midland and go to a bigger city, like you might have to go to Houston or Dallas or Austin or someplace where they have a bigger facility. But that also depends on what you did and if you're serving state time or federal time. There are no juvenile federal facilities in Texas, if I remember correctly. Okay, remember I told you I like true stories. When I worked over in New Mexico a few years ago, we had a 15-year-old that decided he did not want to take a test that day in school. So he did a Snapchat bomb threat. You guys know what Snapchat is. What's the thing that's supposed to happen after 24 hours on Snapchat? It deletes. Guess what? It doesn't. So the kid wanted to get out of a test. He did a Snapchat bomb threat. He's 15 years old, because they had to do all kinds of things like search the facility, send everybody home, do all kinds of stuff like that. So the kid was actually arrested federally for making a terrorist threat. He was tried as an adult, and this 15-year-old got sent to federal prison out of state with the big guys. Because remember, and now he's known as a domestic terrorist. You think his life's ever going to be the same? Would it have been easier to take the test? Yeah, probably so. Okay. So it doesn't always happen that you're going to be local. Now, do you guys live with your families? Mom, dad, grandma, brothers, sisters? Okay. Think about this. If you're sent elsewhere in Texas or out of Texas, is your family going to come visit you every week? Probably not, because they have to get on with their lives too, right? Okay. Now, when I talk about services, I'm asking, what do you think that prison gives you? Do you think you get 3 meals a day? You do. Are they 3 meals you necessarily want to eat? Probably not. They have to give you something that's considered nutritious, and they have to offer you 3 meals a day. Doesn't have to be good food, but it's something that they have to give you, okay? What about, say you don't like any of the food, you can't eat the food. They do have some considerations, but basically, say you want a candy bar. Do you think they're going to give it to you at lunch? No. But you do have something called commissary, which is where you go to like a little store and buy something. You might buy your candy bar. Going to be way overpriced, but who's going to pay for that? You, but where are you going to get the money? Okay, you would have a commissary account, but you depend on other people to put the money in there, right? Okay, and then let's see, you could have a job because somebody has to clean the floors, somebody has to clean the toilets, somebody has to do the laundry. So they provide a bed, which is probably a bunk. They provide meals, and they provide clothing. It's probably a uniform. It's probably also not real comfortable. And what about education? You're in a facility. Do you get education? You do. You have the opportunity. A lot of people who don't have a high school diploma will get their high school diploma while they're in prison. But that is also depending on where you're going and how great their system is. The interesting thing is a lot of prisons nowadays are run on a for-profit basis. So like every state or every city or every town doesn't have their own prison, so they may outsource it to somebody. So these prisons, if they're in it for profit, are they going to give you the best of everything? No, because the more money they save per prisoner, the more they pocket. It's economics. Okay, now, the last one on this one is punitive measures. What's punitive mean? It's right there in the beginning. It's punish. So what types of punishment do you think you could get in prison or in jail? Locked down? Anything else? Say you're in prison or in jail or which kind of facility you're in. Say you start a fight with another inmate. You hurt the other inmate. You can get time added to your sentence. Say you're supposed to go for 2 years and you get in a fight and kill somebody. You could have a whole lot of time added onto your sentence. And you can also end up in solitary confinement, which means you're by yourself 24/7. You guys probably like your phones a lot, right? Imagine being in a room by yourself, no phone, no internet, no anything. Will you survive? Nowadays, I think kids won't survive without their phones. This is a weird one. What about like just personal hygiene, shower facilities, taking a bath every day, washing your hair? Did you ever think about that? How does that happen in prison? Usually as a group, if you get it. Most people don't even like taking a shower in gym class. You can imagine taking it with a bunch of other prisoners. Okay, so basically those are some of the unpleasant factors. Now let's talk money, okay? Money. There are economic factors that deal with incarceration. Fines and fees. So I already said that when you're in jail, or when you go to apply for an expungement or a sealing, that costs money, right? But there are other fines and fees that are associated with criminal justice. Sometimes if you're found guilty in a case, like say you stole a large amount of money, you can actually be charged the amount of money it costs to run your trial. That's called court costs. There are other fines and fees that can be associated with it. Do you guys have money right now? Do you have a ton of money to spare? Most kids don't. Okay, so who's going to pay them? Your parents. Okay, court costs, that was one I was talking about. Child support. Have you guys ever heard the term emancipation? What's it mean? Yes, exactly. It can be either the child filing for emancipation or it can be the parents emancipating their youth. So sometimes when that emancipation process happens, sometimes it's because the kids have racked up so much debt for criminal activity or whatever that they don't want to take responsibility anymore. I actually know a lady and her husband both had good jobs, and one of their kids used to huff paint. So he's basically fried his brain cells, and they basically signed him over to the state, right? The state came back and basically made them pay child support to the state to keep their kid. So child support doesn't just happen in a divorce, okay? Fines and fees we talked about. What about restitution? Do you know what restitution is? Okay. Say you steal a car and you run the car off the road, hit somebody's house, bust into their house, like literally drive into their house, kill their dog, whatever. Somebody's going to have to pay for all that. Since you stole the car, it's probably not going to be car insurance. So sometimes you're asked to pay restitution to the owner of the car, the owner of the house, and the owner of the dog, because emotional distress is inflicted when you kill somebody's dog. So basically, all of that money has to be paid. A lot of times this happens with white-collar criminals, like when they embezzle a lot of money from a company, they have to pay the money back. But it can happen in almost any kind of a case. So if you do damage, you could have to pay restitution. Now, economic instability. If something is not stable, what does that mean? Okay, if I'm standing here on 2 legs, 2 feet, I'm pretty stable. If I stand on 1 leg, what happens? Yep, I'm unstable. So basically, economic instability means you're not stable financially. And remember, if your parents or your grandma or whoever is paying all of this other stuff, they could become financially unstable. So basically, committing crime leads to having less and less in life, not only for you, but also for your family. Now, say you decide you do want to clean up your life and you don't want to do anything going forward. You want to go to school or whatever. Do you know of many schools that don't cost money? What do you want to be when you grow up? Diesel mechanic. Do you have to go to school for that? Trade school, right? What do you want to be? a doctor, you definitely are going to have a lot of medical knowledge and bills. So yeah, if you want to do these things, number one, for yours, you can't have any kind of a criminal record, but also they cost money. If you're financially unstable, it's going to be hard to do that. Okay, records and registries. Do you guys know what a registry is? You know, like when you get married, you can register for stuff to get married. It's kind of the same thing except with criminal records. So there are different types of registries. Okay. Most registries are open to the public. You can find them online. So the sex offender registry, what would that be? For sex offender, what's a sex offender? Somebody who commits a sex offense, a sex crime. So sex offender registries are when somebody has committed that type of an activity, that type of a crime, and they're told they have to be on the registry. So it could be an adult who assaults kids. It could be an adult who assaults other adults. It could be, you know, there's multiple ways to do that. But basically, that registry is where your name, your address is public information. So a lot of times people don't want people on a sex offender registry living in their neighborhood. Why would that be? If you have somebody who assaults kids, do you want them around your kids? Nope. You want them around, don't want them around a school, you don't want them in certain locations. So that's one type of registry. What about the gang database? What would a gang database be? For gang people, how would that work? That's a tougher one, right? Okay, so everybody knows there's gangs around, right? A gang database basically tracks what gangs are in what area. How do you identify somebody who's in a gang, typically? Tattoos, gang signs, things like that. So basically, a gang database is going to keep records of everybody who's in a gang in a specific area. There's actually even a national gang database that tells about the different types of gangs, what type of criminal activity they get in, everything like that. Does Texas have a gang database? We do. Texas has a gang database. So basically the gang database allows law enforcement to say, okay, this new type of tattoo came out. We need to see if there's anybody in this area with this type of tattoo. If so, we could stop them and pull them over. And actually it gives them in Texas a lot of leeway. What about motorcycle gangs? Have you ever seen anybody riding a motorcycle that wears like a vest with like a patch on the back? Okay, they definitely keep track of them because motorcycle gangs are typically involved in things like assault, robbery, drug trafficking, things like that. So imagine this whole database is out there and you end up on it. Is that good or bad? Bad, okay. Are there women on the gang database? Absolutely, okay. There's other ones that talk about it. So you have the sex offender registry. State has it, federal has it. Most of the states keep the repository of that for their own state. I will tell you also for the sex offender registry, if you are told to register as a sex offender and you neglect to do so, you can be sent back to prison or jail. Or if you move and don't tell them that you've moved because they have to keep track of you. Because remember, you don't want a sex offender living next to kids or next to a school. So basically, there's all these types of records and registries that are available. Some of them are like the registries are open to the public online. But not all the criminal records are. But the criminal records are out there. Okay, let's talk about your jobs. You're going to be a diesel mechanic and you're going to be a doctor. Do you think that you have to have a background check for your job? Probably. 90% of employers run a background check. Sometimes it's the school, like you won't even get into medical school if you have a criminal record. A lot of universities and trade schools won't tell you all this information, but employers do look at these things. So it says 90% of employers run background checks on applicants, and then 50% of those, no matter how good of an applicant you are, if you have a criminal record, they will not call you and offer you even an interview, let alone a job. And then 40% of those, if you're found to have a criminal record even afterwards, they won't hire you. So 11% of employers won't even go after, hire you if you have a misdemeanor. Do you guys know the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor? What is it? Yep. Misdemeanors are typically lower level offenses. It could be petty larceny, it could be, sometimes it's simple assault, but it depends on what the crime is. So the worse the crime, the higher the record. Other countries, they call them grave. Grave is serious. So a felony is a serious offense. So that could be manslaughter, aggravated assault, things like that. The more violent the crimes, armed robbery, all that kind of stuff. So a misdemeanor, if you shoplifted, that's a misdemeanor. That would be considered like a type of petty larceny. So an employer wouldn't even look at you if you, 11% of the employers won't even look at you if you have a misdemeanor, so a little record. You get in the picture? The worse it gets, the less opportunities you have. Okay, what's this? Social media. Name me these ones on here. I heard Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, X. Say again? Yeah, no, that's not LinkedIn, but what's the one with the ghost? Snapchat, okay. But yeah, so there's all kinds of them out here, right? Now, here's an interesting question. Do you guys have social media? Do you have any of these? Raise your hand if you have one of them. Raise your hand if you have two of them. 3, 4, all of them? Okay. In your future life, you're wanting to be a doctor, you're wanting to be a diesel mechanic. Do you think employers will look at your social media? They do. With the FBI, if we have social media accounts, we actually have to tell them what our username is so that they can keep kind of track of our profiles. We don't give them the password, just the username. But basically, social media is really, really important. How many of you guys follow like an influencer on any of the social media apps? Okay. Do they look like they have a pretty good lifestyle? Okay. Are they more like this? Or are they more like this? Okay. So everybody wants to live like the guy with the plane and the boat and the car and all that kind of stuff. Do you think everybody on social media is telling the truth? No. Do you believe everything you see on social media? No. So if a job is looking at your social media, are they going to get a true impression of what you are? Why not? Do you sometimes post stuff that maybe is an exaggeration?
I think it's because sometimes we post in not the exact thing that we are living.
Mm-hmm.
We post the bad things on social media, we post the good things.
Yeah. I actually made a promise to myself with all of the hate going on in the world today, and especially in politics and stuff like that, that I was not going to contribute to that. So if I'm posting on social media, I post a lot about my dog because my dog's pretty cool. And I try to post things that are happy or uplifting or funny, like a joke. Not mean, but funny. Because there's enough hate in the world today, right? So if an employer would look at your social media, are they going to see something that's going to make them want to not hire you? You don't want that to happen. Another true story, my niece, when she was in college, she was 19, drinking age is 21, right? She posted a picture of herself on Facebook with friends dressed in lingerie with a big bottle of Jack Daniels. And I told my sister, tell her to take it down. Because my niece was wanting to go into social work. In social work, you work with people who need help, especially kids. Think anybody was going to hire her if they saw that picture? No. The other thing about social media is once it's online, it's out there. Can you get it back? No. Even if you take it down, who's to say somebody else didn't screenshot it or share it? Something like that, right? Plus, those social media companies still have records of them. Interesting thought, right? Okay, why am I here talking to you? What does all this have to do with you? Because you what? Okay. Yep. In our line of work, when we see people come into our office, it is typically on the worst day of their life. Somebody's hurt, somebody's missing, something has happened to them. I really, really hate it when I see kids come in. I've had parents bring their kids in because their kids had something happen to them through social media, like it's called sextortion, where they were talked into putting a picture online of themselves and then, extorted for money. You think it's sad to see a teenager cry? Try watching the parents sit there and cry. You don't want to make your mom and dad cry. Don't want your brother and sister to cry. Don't want your grandma to cry. So you guys have a chance. One of the reasons you're here is because this is part of your sentence, right? You're told to come to the sessions. Everybody who's going to talk to you is coming to help you learn something. Because remember, you do have that permanent record, and it's up to you what's written on your record, right? So even going forward, no matter what you've done now, you can change it, right? Because I'd love to see you as a doctor and you as a diesel mechanic, because you guys can both not only make a ton of money, but you can help people, right? That's why we come here. All right, now, here's your open forum. Do you have any questions for me about anything? Okay, I'm having trouble hearing you. The difference between what? The what in jail? The uniforms in jail? Okay. Okay. Did you happen to see anything written on the back or the front for where he was from? Like what facility? Okay, so that's Midland County Jail. Every jail typically has their own uniforms. They are going to be something that stands out. Do you guys, okay, so just like there's a difference between levels of crime activity, there's also a difference in levels of incarceration. Where I grew up, there was a minimum security federal prison. So the prisoners wore like khaki pants and khaki shirts, and there was no fence. There were guards, but there were no fence. And so they would be out doing like work detail or cleanup or something like that. That's minimum security. So they kind of looked a little bit normal, but you still would have known if they were someplace where they shouldn't belong. So when you look at Midland County Jail, they're probably in there for a reason, like they have to be held on bond, before, they probably can't be bonded out before their trial or whatever. So yeah, if you see the bright like neon uniforms or the one-piece jumpers and stuff like that, they're probably from one of the higher level facilities. But every one of them should have on them where they're from, just so they don't go wandering out in the public. But that's a good question. Anything else? Nope. You have anything you want to say, Kyle? Okay. Pretty easy, right? And you guys were a good audience.
Judy, before you finish, thank you so much, especially at the end when you're talking about, resonating with you about this is just a chance moment to educate them. Meaning, this is a moment that you guys, it may not look like it, or it may not feel like it, but it is what I would call like a transitional moment in your life to say, okay, yes, I'm here. However you got here, really doesn't matter. Unless you continue down that path. You talk about economic costs. You guys are too young, but there's this thing that passed years ago, Texas passed called the surcharges. And when you got a certain ticket, no driver's license or no insurance, you had to pay additional costs, which was small. It was only $250 a year, but for 3 years. I had 24 of those. I had to pay $30,000 in a short amount of time when I was in my 20s. You guys weren't here the last time, but during that same time, I had 22 warrants in 4 different counties. It wasn't until like I was in the moment, even when your age, I was facing 20 years to life. You talk about restitution and all these other stuff. It doesn't feel like there's cost. First off, you haven't had the privilege of the burden of responsibility to pay bills, pay your car payment, have to go and make money so you can eat, things like that. So you're like, I was like desensitized to what that means. So I did those things thinking there was no real cost. But then what is not really discussed as well is, but it's assumed is, these things are going on while you're still living life. So this was going on, I was having a daughter, a second daughter, I was getting married. Now imagine all this extra cost that I put on myself that now my family has to burden with me, or telling my daughters that we can't go there, I can't buy you this, I can't take you here, because I have all this mountain of costs that I've accumulated because I just was ignorant, made stupid decisions, or just chose to ignore the obvious. And so for like Miss Judy, I'm also hoping that this isn't a moment for us to talk at you or to instill, in a sense, our own beliefs, but it is a chance moment in your life because it does affect us. All those things that happened with me, you don't think it affected the rest of the community or stuff like that? Like all the time, I don't know how many no seatbelt signs. I finally realized, I'll end with this, I finally realized that if you just follow the law, you have more freedom. Because there are moments where if I had a felony or something, I got close to getting one, things like that, where your gun rights are restricted, your travel's restricted, you can't get a passport, stuff like that. Do what? Yeah, you can't vote, and voting is definitely necessary for trying to curate, I guess, a good community. But all these other things that where I thought I'm an animal, I'll just live however I want, they're not going to tell me what to do, and I actually the circle got smaller and smaller, and I'm like, you know what, Sam, just follow the rules. Just do everything they tell you to do, and they won't even look your way. But if you continue down this path, they're going to hold you with a magnifying glass and watch you for the rest of your life. And I've seen people like that. You talk about, there's certain offenses, you're going to be watched your whole life. Yep. And now with social media and stuff, you're really going to be watched. And I just didn't want that anymore. But I've lived it.
So you put yourself in jail?
I put myself in jail. No,
yeah.
Truly. And those 21 days, it was a whole other story, but even those 21 days when I was almost facing a sentence, you talk about costs that you don't see. My daughter's 21 now, but she was 10 then, and we're still working through the traumatization of it, because from one moment to the next, I was gone. I was picking them up and taking them to school, going to their lunches, like I was very involved, and then from one moment to the next, she didn't see me. And I wasn't definitely going to talk to my kids through this looking glass. I didn't want to do that. My father was in and out of prison my whole life, and I did that with him, and I just didn't want to do it. So for 21 days, I didn't talk to them or see them, and she was incredibly, and still is, incredibly traumatized from it. And so there's other costs versus the financial costs that come with it, like talking about. And so I definitely hope, I would never want to wish that on anybody, but if we could minimize that, then that's what I hope to do with this program too. Because we live in the same community, you know. I hate for you. I run into you, you don't have a seatbelt on or something, or the opposite, and then it can cost us our lives.
And we don't want to see you in the FBI on the worst day of your life either.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you talk about
You don't want us coming to your house.
talk about the sealing the records. Same, I had to go through a process to get that 15, but it's still there. If anybody wanted to, they could pull it up. So yeah, it never goes away. I thought the permanent record thing was a joke when I was a kid.
It's true.
You know, I was like, oh, it's real. Like what? Anyway, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mrs. Judy, that you get an opportunity. But again, also I want to try to say this every classroom too. Is even the people that you meet in these rooms and stuff. If you see us out in public, say hello. Like I'm gonna say this often. Doing life and I'll say business because I'm in business, but doing life alone is already hard. So try not to do life alone. There's a bunch of people around you, especially in the community, that if you really want to do good for yourself, you'll have support.
I mean, obviously there's people that care about you because we all could be anywhere else.
Exactly.
We could be doing anything else, but we want to make sure that you stay out of trouble, get out of trouble, stay out of trouble, be productive members of society like you want to be. So you don't have, you're not alone. People care about you, so just always remember that.
I could be home, my dog.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I don't know what you're going through and what your household is, and you may have never had, whether it's someone close to you or a stranger, say, hey, I care. I care what happens to you. I care that you don't go down there, So if nobody else cares, we care. Awesome, guys. That's it. Appreciate it. Let me sign that for you guys.